During my annual review, my manager smirked, "Honestly, you're like a backup generator, only useful when things go wrong." When I tried to protest, he raised his hand and said, "Be grateful you're still employed. Loyalty matters more than talent." So I took his advice, collected every project I single-handedly saved, and presented it to his boss. The day they posted his replacement, he didn't even get to pack his own desk. I've always been the kind of guy who does his job, keeps his head down, and doesn't make noise. I'm not flashy. I don't chase titles. I care about doing the right thing and making sure the work gets done. That's it. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, and I worked for a logistics software company that most people have never heard of, but trust me, it keeps things running for a lot of major shipping companies. The software our team built could reroute delivery trucks when there were floods or snowstorms. If something went wrong on a national level, our platform was part of the fix. It mattered. I was a systems analyst. That's what my title said. But in reality, I was more like the cleanup crew. I was the guy they called when things were already on fire. Didn't matter if it was someone else's mistake. Didn't matter if it was supposed to be someone else's responsibility. If things were falling apart, they came to me. And I always said yes. I stayed late. I canceled vacations. I jumped in without needing recognition. I thought if I just kept showing up, someone would notice. Someone would say, "Hey, this guy is the reason we're still afloat." But that never happened. My manager was Dean Wilkes. The type of guy who talks more than he listens. Always shaking hands, always name-dropping the higher-ups. He knew how to survive in a corporate setting. And I think deep down, he knew I made him look good. So he kept me around, but only because I was useful to him. Still, I tried to keep things peaceful. I wasn't there to play games. I just wanted to do good work. Then came my annual review. I had a binder. I'm not kidding. A thick, organized binder with every major project I worked on, complete with emails, stats, timelines. Proof. I walked into that office with my head high. I thought maybe this was the year I'd get that raise. Maybe even a title change. Dean didn't even look at the binder. He flipped it closed like it annoyed him. Then he said, "Honestly, you're like a backup generator, only useful when things go wrong." I stared at him. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. When I tried to say something, he raised his hand to stop me. "Be grateful you're still employed," he said. "Loyalty matters more than talent. That's why you're here." I felt like I got punched in the stomach. I went home that night and sat at the kitchen table for an hour without touching my dinner. My wife finally asked what happened, and I told her everything. She listened. Then she said, "Don't just take that. Show them what you've done. All of it. Let them see the truth." And something snapped in me. I wasn't going to yell or complain. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum. I was going to do what I did best, work quietly and make things happen. I pulled every file, every success, every save I'd made in 10 years. And I prepared to go over Dean's head. So here's what I did. I didn't rush. I took my time. For 3 weeks, I gathered everything. I went back through old servers, old emails, project files, stuff most people forgot about. I built a timeline that showed every major crisis the company had faced over the last 10 years, and every time I was the one who fixed it. Not the team. Not Dean. Me. I didn't add drama. I didn't pad the numbers. I let the facts speak. I even included the times I wasn't officially assigned to the project. Just looped in last minute when someone else had dropped the ball. Then I did something I'd never done before. I scheduled a private meeting with Rachel McKenna, the director of operations. She was 2 levels above Dean. I didn't know her personally, but she was known for being no nonsense. I figured if anyone would actually look at the data, it would be her. I told her I had some performance-related documentation I'd like her to review. No complaints. No gossip. Just facts. She gave me 20 minutes. When I walked into her office, I handed her a flash drive and said, "I've been with the company for over 10 years. I don't want anything from you. I just want to make sure the right people are being recognized for the work that's keeping this place running." She raised an eyebrow but plugged it in. I watched her scroll for a full 5 minutes. She didn't say a word. Then she looked at me and said, "You did all this?" I nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She asked me to leave the drive with her. That was a Thursday. By Monday, things were different. First, there was a surprise audit of all department performance metrics going back 5 years. Nobody said why, but people were on edge. Dean looked nervous. He kept pacing. Kept closing his door. Then Rachel started calling people in for meetings. Quiet ones. She didn't ask Dean. She asked people who had been around long enough to remember the messes I cleaned up. I heard my name come up again and again in the break room. On Wednesday, Dean didn't show up for work. On Thursday, there was an all-hands meeting. Rachel stood in front of the entire department and said there would be a change in leadership effective immediately. Dean was out. No farewell, no heads up. He didn't even get to pack his desk. HR boxed his stuff and mailed it to him. People were stunned. But what got me wasn't that he was fired, it was that Rachel didn't announce a replacement. Instead, she looked at me, dead in the eyes, and said, "Some people don't need a title to lead. But we're going to fix that." For the first time in a decade, I felt like I could breathe at work. People who had barely spoken to me before started dropping by my desk, asking questions, even apologizing for things they'd once brushed off. I wasn't used to the attention, but I stayed quiet and kept working. I didn't want to get comfortable. I had a feeling things weren't over yet. And I was right. About 2 weeks after Dean was fired, I got an email from a name I hadn't seen in years, Kyle Brenner. He used to be a senior project manager before he left for a job in Kansas City. He was smart, but we never really talked much. I clicked the email. "Call me ASAP. Something's going on with Dean. Not over." That was all it said. So I called. Kyle picked up on the first ring. "Hey. Look, I know we never really hung out, but I've got something you need to see. It's about Dean." He sounded tense. I said, "What about him?" Kyle explained that he had stayed in touch with a few folks from our company, and one of them had told him Dean wasn't just fired for bad leadership. There was something deeper, something about misuse of funds. I froze. "What kind of misuse?" "Kickbacks," Kyle said. "From a vendor. Back when we rolled out that freight tracking update in 2022. Remember that?" I did. The system upgrade had cost almost double what it should have, and we had to scramble to make it work. I'd ended up rewriting half the integration code myself. "Well," Kyle continued, "turns out Dean might have gotten a cut from that inflated budget. My buddy from finance said there were weird payments buried in the invoices. Dean had set up a shell company, McAllister Group LLC. Payments were routed there as consulting fees." My jaw clenched. That whole project almost got me fired because of the delays, and Dean had acted like it was my fault. Kyle added, "If you still have your notes from that rollout, and you kept any old email chains, it might help. You could blow this wide open." I thanked him and hung up. I spent the whole weekend digging through my old backups. I found the original vendor contracts, project timelines, and a string of emails between Dean and the vendor rep, none of which had ever been copied to the main server. He'd kept things off the record. But he'd made mistakes. In one email, the vendor asked, "Should we push the extra $30K through McAllister Group again, or split it this time?" That was enough. I packaged everything. But this time I didn't go to Rachel. I sent it directly to corporate legal. Not a single word, just the files, and a note that said, "I believe these documents warrant investigation under Section 8.4 of the Corporate Conduct Policy." 2 days later, corporate flew in unannounced. Lawyers. Auditors. They didn't talk to anyone but leadership. By the end of the week, a full internal investigation was launched. And suddenly, Rachel stopped replying to emails. At first, I thought maybe Rachel had gotten sick or taken time off. But after 5 days of silence from her, I started to get that same sick feeling in my gut I'd had after my review with Dean. Something wasn't right. Then I got the meeting invite. Subject: confidential, HR and compliance. It was from someone at corporate. Not a name I recognized. No details, just a time. Friday at 3 p.m. A voice in my head told me to start preparing, so I did. I went in calm, like always. The call was already live when I joined, 2 people on video, both in suits, both dead serious. "Mr. Allen," the woman said, "thank you for joining. We've reviewed the files you submitted, and we appreciate you bringing the matter to our attention. However, in the course of our investigation, we've discovered additional information that requires clarification." That's when they dropped the bomb. They had traced activity from my company account, messages between me and the vendor during that same 2022 rollout. Nothing illegal. But there were signs I had flagged the overspending and then stopped pushing it. I remembered exactly what happened. I had flagged it. Dean had pulled me into a private chat, told me to leave it alone, that everything above my pay grade was handled. I had backed off. I didn't push it higher. I didn't ask questions. I just focused on fixing the tech. But now, corporate saw it as complicity. You were the only person with access to all the data sets. You had visibility others didn't. And while you may not have benefited financially, your failure to escalate could be seen as negligence under the ethics policy. I sat there, stunned. They weren't wrong. I didn't steal anything. I didn't take kickbacks. But I saw a red flag and I let it go. Because I didn't want to rock the boat. I stayed quiet too long. They offered me 2 options: formal investigation, or early retirement with severance and a non-disclosure agreement. I had 10 years in. A mortgage. Kids in school. I chose the deal. And just like that, I was done. I cleared out my desk the same way Dean had, without a goodbye, without a warning. Only I got to carry my own box. Dean was later arrested. Fraud. Embezzlement. The McAllister Group trail went deep, 2 other managers got taken down too. Rachel? She had known. That's why she stopped replying. She had tried to cover for Dean during the vendor contract approval. She took early retirement too, and walked away with a clean slate. Just like me. I moved on. Started doing consulting part-time. It pays the bills. But some nights, when it's quiet, I think about that day in Dean's office. The smirk. The insult. And I wonder if maybe he was right. Maybe I was just a backup generator. But the thing about generators? They still burn fuel. And sometimes, they burn everything down with them.